I get it. Y'all don't like RTD coming back to Doctor Who, but we just have to get along. All right.
You're listening to a mostly harmless cutaway.
Mostly harmless. Mostly harmless? Oh, come. I think that's pretty good coverage for a disintegrated pile of rubble.
Hi, this is Eric.
This is Josh.
This is Carl.
And this is Caleb.
And welcome back to the land where it remains 100 degrees Fahrenheit after the sun goes down. That actually has nothing to do with Doctor Who, but where I've been living for the last 2 weeks. But anyway, for those keeping track at home, this is MHC 181, I believe, is the official tally.
There's no halves or three quarters or anything for this one?
Yeah, I'm not counting dot or bubble episodes that have appeared here and there.
I see what you did there.
I just thought of that in real time, by the way. But anyway, for those keeping track at home and know about the curse, it is still in full effect. I think we mentioned it maybe on the last or the 2 episodes ago about the curse. But a certain cat was supposed to be here yet again.
There's no Fenric involved, right?
But we can't have both of them here at the same time because apparently time, space, paradox, existential crisis. I don't know what'll happen. Maybe it'll be the end of the podcast, the day we get both of them to appear at the same time. I posited on last recording that perhaps they are secretly roommates, and we're unaware, and so only one can be on the mic. Otherwise their cover is blown. I'm not really sure what's going on.
We're sure that there are 2 people, right?
Well, with AI voice changing technology the way it is these days,
we should add an AI. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Oh, that's a great idea, said Skynet. I'm currently watching a Tubi special called Monster of Man, which is basically the Predator meets Terminator 1, is pretty much the premise.
By the way, you can get classic Doctor Who on Tubi.
Oh, yes, you can. You can get plenty of classic Doctor Who.
And it's very, very flexible. You can watch one Doctor at a time if you want.
Yeah, and you don't have to watch randomizer style.
You don't have to watch randomizer style. Nope.
Yeah, you can do a la carte, and you can actually pause and skip.
I'm telling you right now, Tubi would have been the best thing when I was 13.
Oh, I would still be a child today if Tubi existed when I was 13 years old. I would have turned into a character from Dot and Bubble, and I would still be watching reruns of Chips, Facts of Life, Who's the Boss, Soap.
Tubi.
What was the one I just saw the other day? The show I'd forgot about forever.
The Carol Burnett show?
It's from the late 80s, sitcom, and there's the older couple, and they have their adult children, and then there's the ambiguously gay guy who comes around all the time.
Too Close for Comfort?
That's it. I forgot the show. We should play match game together.
I'm telling you right now, that. By the way, Too Close for Comfort's not late 80s. It's more like early 80s.
Whoa. But I obviously remember seeing the show, but I forgot it existed until I saw it pop up on Tubi, and I was like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, he wasn't ambiguously gay, by the way.
Josh, I was 9 years old. I barely knew what gay meant. I just thought it meant happy.
It does.
Well, yeah, I know, but that's the only, I was so naive.
Well, that was the 40s, so,
Wait, what? What are you talking about?
Back in the 40s, gay was happy. Anyway, Doctor Who.
Let's not forget. I grew up in the land where people smoke fags. Let's not forget.
Yeah, that's true.
And we had a lot of other words that got me in trouble when I came to the U.S., like rubber, but that's a story for another day. Means 2 different things depending on what side of the pond. Well, especially if you're in the 80s or 90s. It doesn't really make sense nowadays, but in the 80s or 90s, it had 2 extremely different definitions depending on what
side. Dot and Bubble.
Oh, Doctor Who.
Yeah, speaking of naive people.
Who is this guy named Josh who's joining us.
What?
Because we have been recording, Inside Baseball episodes of MHC this series have been recorded out of chronological order. So because of this, and Josh obviously hasn't been on in a while, let's go back to the Flux and give us your hot take. No, just kidding. Let's go.
I don't even remember the Flux. So
let's go back to the beginning of the Ncuti, post Giggle and post Ruby Road.
Oh, I can do this like in 2 minutes.
Starting with Space Babies, and skipping 73 yards.
Okay, I'll skip 73 yards. Okay, Space Babies basically was a typical RTD start of a season. It's always silly and stupid. He's been doing that for years. Every single first episode has been silly and stupid. So I wasn't surprised by Space Babies, but it was silly and stupid. The Devil's Cord. The interesting thing about the Devil's Cord to me was that RTD spent the Christmas telling us we shouldn't put a villain in a wheelchair because we'll think that all disabled people are evil. But he just made a drag queen an evil person. So now I'm afraid of drag queens. So thanks, RTD, for making me afraid of drag queens.
Oh, dear.
What was it there? Oh, Boom. Love Boom. Boom was a bottle episode, which is really great to see a bottle episode. Felt very much like what he was trying to achieve in Midnight, with a little bit of a different tact, but good. Like it was actually pretty good. Like I had no complaints, mostly no complaints about the episode. It was pretty good.
Well, you said like what he was trying to do with Midnight, except of course RTD was the showrunner, obviously, and he wrote Midnight, but of course he didn't write Boom.
No, he didn't write Boom. Stephen Moffat wrote Boom, but it's nice to see a bottle episode. It's been a while. I don't think Chibnall could have even conceived of a bottle episode.
Well, it would have been a bottle on screen.
Exactly.
Don't laugh. That was like the dumbest thing I've said.
No. But it fits, man, because that's what he would think a bottle episode was. So, yeah, I mean, overall, that was okay. Not in love with the series overall. It's okay. It's certainly, look, the bar has been set really low with everything from Chibnall. So, the series has definitely been written better than the Chibnall episodes, for sure. But am I in love with this Doctor? Am I in love with this series? No, I'm not. I'm not in love with it. I will tell you that Millie Gibson, I've actually been very surprised by Millie Gibson because she's been pretty good, like as an actress. I'm pretty impressed with her so far. But overall, it's okay. I mean,
that's good.
Do I schedule my watching? Yeah, I actually do. No, I actually do. I do watch it. But, what I felt at the beginning was that I wouldn't want to really talk about it. And for the most part, in the first 2 episodes, I didn't really want to talk about it. And for the third one, yeah, I kind of want to talk about it. And certainly for 73 Yards, I want to talk about that when we do talk about that one.
We're all dying to talk about it here.
And Dot and Bubble, I'm happy to talk through that one as well. I mean, so I guess in the beginning, I didn't feel like I really wanted to engage on it, but now that I've watched a few, like I have a few comments to make, and I might as well make it in this forum, which is my favorite.
Well, I only have 2 more things to say until we get into it, Dot and Bubble, which is some of the things you just addressed at the end of your soliloquy, I will readdress probably during this forthcoming discussion. Some of the things I've already said in episodes that we've done recently, and I'll expand upon some of that probably. And the second thing I want to say, I don't want to jinx myself, but apparently the wish I made during the solar eclipse is coming true, which is that Josh would get somewhat copacetic again in regards to New Who. I don't want to jinx it. But
you know what, Eric? It's more about talking about it with you guys than it is watching the show.
Hey, whatever makes the boat float, I don't care.
And that's what's making the boat float. I mean, there are some things I want to talk about, but overall, it's not what I remember Doctor Who being or anything like that. It's
Well, yeah, I don't know.
Very much a Disney show.
If anyone remembers Doctor Who being like this back in the day, tell me about the psychedelics you were using.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand. But that being said, there's things I like about this Doctor Who in a way I've never quite experienced, and maybe some of that will come out in the next conversation as well.
All right.
So, without further ado, oh no!
And that was a lot of ado.
A little bit more ado.
That's a lot of ado.
Oh no, a little bit more. Oh god.
A little bit more ado. Some more inside baseball. This is probably one of the few times, it may have happened once or twice before, where we are actually in real time recording after a new episode of Doctor Who that most of us have not even seen at all. And this has probably only happened once or twice ever on the podcast. So
I've seen it.
Right. But we'll talk about that hopefully next week or the week after, because again, listeners, these are not being recorded in the order that they appear, which is a MHC tradition, to be fair. I mean, we've just been having Series 9 coming out recently on the feed.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Oh no!
We just did the Time Monster that we recorded in 1972. I remember that.
All right. Now we're gonna do Dot and Bubble, which I'm not even sure what episode, because no one even knows what episode 1 is of this new series or season 1. I don't even know if it's called series or season 1 now. I think it's called season 1 probably because it's
season 1.
It's series 1, and yes, it's calling the Church of Ruby Road episode 1 on Disney Plus.
That's the thing. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Like we thought it was a special, but it's episode.
Yeah,
1.
none of it makes sense. I mean, so
it's like MHC numbering.
It's very much like that. It's like this is series 1 of MHC, you guys. Okay, we're rebranding.
Not many people know that RTD receives a few show notes from me. I don't expect him to really acknowledge any of them, but this might be the one show note that he's taken from me. All right, so Dot and Bubble, they're calling it the 5th episode of Series 14 of Doctor Who, featuring the 15th Doctor, Ncuti Gatwa, who is Scottish Nigerian, I believe, and not ambiguously a G-man.
A gangster?
Obviously a gangster. No, he's formerly of the FBI. But anyway, so this one, I'm just gonna say a little bit of primer, but then I definitely want to hear Caleb and Josh, and then I'll go, and then we'll have the big show after that.
You mean Carl?
I love the big show. When's he gonna come in? There we go.
Yeah, I picture him in a onesie that only has one strap that goes over one shoulder.
Exactly. Doing the same big show.
That's how I see him in my head. But anyway,
folks, wrestling reference, okay? Just so you all know.
Yeah, it's when Big Show was doing the throwback Andre the Giant. Whenever I think of the Princess Bride, it's a toss up for me. Is Josh Andre the Giant, or is he inconceivable? It's one or the other for me.
You mean me or Carl?
Yeah.
No,
I thought
Carl.
you were talking about Carl.
Oh, you said Josh.
Oh, well, apparently I think Carl is Josh also at times. But anyway,
got a weird mind going on over there these days.
Well, Doctor Who's got me turned upside down. The quick primer I wanted to say, because it's kind of obvious, just like when I hit play the first time on this episode, and I felt this a little bit with some of the recent new episodes as well, but even more so with this one in particular, which is right off the bat, you think you're watching Black Mirror on Netflix.
That's what he was going for.
100%. And you know what? I'm not mad about it. At least in this particular case. Obviously, I don't want every Doctor Who episode going forward to be like Black Mirror. But for this one episode, I'm good with it. And it works for me. And even if, it's not bad, even if it is intentionally trying to mimic or evoke Black Mirror vibes, fine. Why not? Doctor Who obviously has a long tradition of borrowing genres and think motifs here and there everywhere. So that's fine, and I like it. And actually, that's all I want to say for right.
I wish that more Doctor Who was like Black Mirror, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Right, to an extent.
But again, like Black Mirror is very adult, and Doctor Who is supposed to be a family show. Should I say a children's program?
Well, yeah,
No, family. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yes, no. But as we all know, some of the best episodes throughout all the different decades are extremely adult and not for kids when you really think about it.
Agreed.
Not necessarily because they're graphic or anything, but because the subject matter and the way it's presented in certain episodes is so dark. It's so dour. It's so like intense.
Yeah, but this one doesn't have all those layers. It just has...
Oh no, I'm not saying that. Yeah, but I just mean.
I mean, from a Black Mirror perspective, there's layers, and this one didn't feel like it had too many layers to it. It was.
Well, I'd be interested to hear, Josh, what layers you felt in this particular story.
I mean, it didn't make me think in any way, shape, or form.
Whoa! Well, you almost sound like a test case for Dot and Bubble.
Damn.
I mean, it didn't make me think at all. I mean, it was just in your face about it. I mean, they were.
Oh, well, tell me what they were in your face about.
Oh God, the technology. We're all in a bubble. The kids are all in a bubble, talking to their friends. You know, and then they don't even see the monsters that are around them. They can't even walk without using their phone. All this other stuff. I mean, it's very, and then the clear racism piece, which was basically, I don't know what to say about it except it was shoved in your face very clearly. There wasn't any nuance to it.
I'm sure we're going to talk about that quote unquote racist aspect more later. But was
and
it
all the? I mean, a BBC show where they're showing a bunch of white people. Like, if you didn't catch that fairly quickly.
Well, okay. So let me address that element. Because I was going to say before this, was it more racist or was it more classist? Or...
Oh, it was both. It was surely both.
Sectist, S-E-C-T. Because, but then to address the racism angle for a second, because you just reminded me, I forgot about that element. That
you forgot about it? It was
no, not the way everyone else has been talking about it, but the way I was.
It was like a brick shoved into your face.
Hold on, I know, but the way I was thinking about it, I don't think was the way everyone else I've seen online has been thinking about it. The racism aspect in particular, which is before I fully knew, like when I was early in this episode. Before I knew exactly where we were going with this and how it was going to turn out. So I did notice right off the bat, obviously, you see pretty much exclusively Caucasian characters existing in this, what was it called? Fine Time Land. And I thought, because the BBC has been training me since approximately 2005-ish, or no, even in the late 90s in certain series, because they've been training me for all these years that they're all about diversity casting, it's a mandate. We all know, literally a mandate for them. And because I wasn't seeing color tones and other ethnicities represented, like, my radar went off and I went, whoa. And this is early in the episode. I realized this. And then I was thinking about what happens in a lot of newer Star Trek, especially the one that starts with the letter D on Paramount Plus, and how I was telling Sean a few years ago how if it was a Caucasian male, a Caucasian straight male character who appeared on new Star Trek, they had to either be a pre-existing character, like someone reprising the role of a known character,
like Pike,
right, or they had to be bad. But if they appeared good, you would discover they were bad later. That was the trend in the early new Star Trek of the streaming days. And so I had that in the back of my head when I noticed everyone's suspiciously white early in. And at first I thought, oh, maybe it's because that's who her friends are, which of course is part of the fabric of the story. But I thought, no. There's going to be a twist, and it's going to explain, and it's going to be justified from a producer point of view, a BBC producer point of view, why it is the way it is. So it definitely turned out. But my point actually is not about racism. My point is, even though this is not my favorite episode or anything, for me, it had the wheels turning, because when I've been watching new Doctor Who, especially since RTD came back in general, I'm just realizing this now in real time as I'm saying it. As I've been watching every new RTD episode, my brain is subconsciously trying to reverse engineer every story, like structurally and how it's written. And so even with some of these episodes that are not the most interesting, like let's say Space Babies, my brain was still actively trying to work it out. Like, what was RTD doing? What's his intention? Where is he going? So even if it's not the most engaging episode, my brain is still engaged. And obviously I wasn't trying to reverse engineer anything during Chibnall's era, just saying. So
why bother?
Exactly. So anyway.
I mean, Space Babies was Partners in Crime.
Worse.
Yeah.
And you know what, Caleb, I'm with you. It was worse than that. It was... That's
funny, because I would rather watch Space Babies than Partners in Crime. But
I'd rather watch E-Trade commercials from the mid-10s.
Yeah, lots of things are better than those two episodes. That's for damn sure.
I was watching YouTube TV yesterday, and for some reason, all the things I was watching, like the voice got out of sync with the audio track, and it made me think I was watching Space Babies, because none of the voices were matching on any.
That was, I mean, I don't want to jump back into Space Babies, but like, just lazy.
I can't get into it again right now. Anything else, Josh, you'd like to say about this episode?
No. I mean, I'll listen to what other people say, but
please do.
I thought it was, kind of really on the surface. Not really a lot of thought on my part, and if that's what RTD was going for, then it was very easy to understand what was going on. That's why I said, like, when you bring up Black Mirror, like with most Black Mirror episodes, it's much more intelligent, deeper, with that you have to think about it after it happened. Dot Bubble, I don't have to think about it.
I mean, I think that last statement you just made is for the most part true. Like, I agree with it, that Black Mirror is typically deeper. But even if that remains true, I can still enjoy this, even though it's not written to that same type of level.
Well, I mean, I enjoy, a Tootsie Pop.
I do too.
You know what I mean? Like, I enjoy a Tootsie Pop, but like, it's not doing anything for me. And it's kind of, it's kind of boring. I mean, was I worried about this woman's life? No, not even in the beginning, not even for a moment. Like, I could care less about everybody who appeared in front of me. So is that character? Is that on purpose? I mean, it just, I never felt anything for anybody there, So, like, I didn't have any skin in the game.
I got you.
Okay, so that's, I mean, I'll let other people speak. I've way over spoken this topic.
No, you're fine. We've been droning on individually a lot in recent recordings on MHC. But Caleb, sir, the person who, if you hadn't heard, Josh, because I don't know that it's been released yet, what you missed while you were away from the podcast is Caleb, who has pretty much always despised Moffat and his writing, actually had the most kind things that Caleb has ever had to say when we talked about Boom. So I don't even know.
You should have named it Doom.
Yeah. So I don't even know what's happening with Caleb, because I mean, he's usually the new Who curmudgeon in general, and he's actually been saying some nice things lately here and there. So I have no idea what to expect.
One episode
now. So Well, you had. Oh no, you weren't there on Devil's Court. Never mind. But anyway, go on, Caleb. I have literally no idea what you're going to say right now.
Yeah, I still don't really know either. I watched this thing twice, and yeah, I don't really know what to think of it. I definitely appreciate the attempt to try to bring in some of that quality and interesting stories from Black Mirror, but I don't think any of the new Doctor Who writers, at least the showrunners, I should say, have the skill of Charlie Brooker. And this thing definitely just it feels like a bit of a hollow imitation. I like the look of it. I think there's a lot of great visuals. I think the actress in the lead, I think she plays that part really well. I hate that character throughout, and she's doing a great job making me hate her.
Yeah, she kind of reminds me. I was just thinking about this during the previous what we were just talking about, and looking at her on screen at the same time. And you guys mentioned Partners in Crime, and well, actually, it's more Runaway Bride, because most people thought that Catherine Tate's character Donna she wasn't loved when it was just the Runaway Bride out
Horrible.
there. Right, and looking at this actress now on screen and thinking about this, she kind of reminds me of like a younger Catherine Tate, a la Runaway Bride type character. I'm starting to sense that now. But anyway, sorry, go on.
The twist at the end. There's always a twist at the end, I guess. The first time I watched it, I was kind of like, okay, like in a way, I kind of felt this coming, but when it did come, I was kind of like, yeah, what was it all for? And I kind of wonder with you, Josh, when you're saying, this didn't make you think at all. I wasn't fully sure what you meant, because I definitely spent a lot of time wondering, like, why exactly did they make that choice for the twist? And thinking about the overall plot, I think that there was a number of weird things that didn't really connect, and that ending for me felt in a similar way of didn't fully connect. I appreciate the idea of doing the scene. I think that's not a bad idea, concept for a Doctor Who episode. It just felt a little bit.
What was some of the other things that you said you weren't sure how they quite fit besides the end?
Really, when it comes down to it, the whole idea of these slug things, to me, doesn't really seem to make any sense. Like, we see at the end, that Ricky September guy, these little dot, I guess not dot bubbles, little dot things, they can clearly do the job on their own. They can just pop right through your head.
Yes.
What was the point
Thank you.
Creating all these genetically modified slug things?
Yeah, it seemed like it was a turn when it was the dot that was. It's just weird, like how they added that in. It's almost like the slug creatures weren't even that important.
It also made me think, because the Doctor at the end, he's so convinced, don't go into those woods. You're gonna be dead if you go in there. And at the first time I watched it, I was kind of like, oh, it's because those slug guys were, from the Wild Woods.
That's what I thought too. Yeah.
I guess I missed the line that they said that they are genetically created. And so watching it the second time, I was kind of like, why is he so convinced that they're all going to die?
This is also a mark of the series, also, which is there's no explanation.
No, there
isn't. And they're good with that. They're happy with no explanation for anything.
There is not an explicit explanation for many things. It's true. But at the same time, my mind works on some of these instances and some of these new episodes. And I think there is something unspoken, sometimes, not always. And I think there is something about the woods and what Caleb was just talking about. Like, I haven't fully sussed it out yet, but I don't think it's nothing. The fear of the woods. But I also don't think it's the most important thing either. But I think you're right. Okay. In universe, like in the episode universe, you're right. There are these kind of illogical, non sequiturs, red herring type things, elements. But from the allegory that RTD is obviously trying to lay out, spell out, I think it makes more sense with the allegory he's going for, but less sense in universe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but why the slug things? Because you could use this whole allegory, these people are so caught in their own echo chambers, they can't really see what's happening in the world around them. They're living in this false reality. Why does it have to be slug beasties? Is it just for the visual, or?
I think the first simple answer is tractators. No, just kidding. I meant to open the episode with that, because as I was watching this and when we first started getting really clear looks of the creature in the episode, my mind went to Frontios, and I was thinking, man, if Frontios, or however you pronounce it, if it was produced nowadays, I think they would look cool like this, and it would be a much cooler episode because I think we did it some months ago on the.
Love that episode. Absolutely.
Yes, I'm one of the people. It's on my list of Doctor Who's that most people don't appreciate or underappreciated Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who, which just struck a chord with me mainly because of nostalgia initially, because it's one of the it's one of the first classic Doctor Who's that I remember very clearly, because I remember I saw some before that, but Frontios is very clear in my memory, and I always loved it as a kid, so I had nostalgia, blah blah blah. And so I enjoy watching Frontios and the rest of season 21. And so, yeah, so I couldn't help but think about Tractators when we had like...
I'm going to say that Frontios is a much better conceived episode than this one was.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I'll give you that. But because of the serialized nature, it drags out longer than it needs to. But anyway, we're not talking about Frontios. So... Okay, no, but getting back to what I was really going to say, the monsters are, I think, the simple take. And I haven't really had enough time to really digest this episode fully because I actually think I need to do more thinking on this later.
Oh, don't bother.
I will, because I'm interested.
Just go watch the 11th Hour again.
It'll always be there for me in my time of need. But, okay, so I think... from a simple allegorical perspective, so RTD is trying to say that when you get in your bubble and you lose like your awareness of the real world, your real surroundings around you, you know, in the allegorical sense, then there are entities out there that can take advantage of you in a multitude of ways, because you have turned into like a sheep. You know, you're basically like, I can't remember what they're called in the Time Machine or in the original Dalek episode.
Eloy. Yeah,
the Eloy. These people are basically become Eloy, and the Tractator, I don't even know if they have a name in the story, the slug creatures, but I'm just going to call them Tractators from now on. They are basically like the Morlocks or just some type of being out there that can take advantage of you when you become like a sheep. And that's the allegory, is that when you get lost in your social media bubble or TikTok or whatever in the modern world, there are forces out there who will just gobble you up metaphorically in a multitude of ways because you have blinders on. And I think he's going more for the allegory and less of how that actually makes sense.
I wish that was the case. Like, I wish it was a little bit more.
I think it is the case, and yes, you're right.
No, but like I think you're giving it too much credit by calling it allegory. Like it's
clearly allegory.
I mean, it is, but like it's just,
he's saying it's on the nose. Is what John.
It's way too like on the nose. Like it just. I mean, I understand your utilization of the word allegory here.
I'll make a slightly facetious argument or counter argument, which is, if you think, let's say this show is geared towards Gen Zers or up and coming like the younger, or just Gen Z and the youngest Gen Zers current day.
Yeah, you can definitely say that.
So, okay. So as we all know, when you watch shows on whatever network or streaming service that are geared towards that age group, and however true or false this is irrelevant. We all know that the perception is by those who produce content for that audience group is that they have short attention spans, and they don't take the time. And I'm not trying to sound like a boomer right now, because I know there's a Gen Zer listening to me going, "Oh my God, what is the old man like talking about?"
No, they're not listening to us. We take too long to talk about stuff. They're not listening to us.
Exactly. But for those few out there who have like OCD or something, who still listen to us because they can't turn away.
Aww.
So if you're thinking that RTD is trying to make this show for the new up and coming generation, Disney Plus, yada, 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 new viewers checking out Doctor Who for the first time, you probably need to, if you're catering to that audience, you do need to make it explicit.
Yeah, you have to dumb it down. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, you do. I mean, no offense to anyone.
No, completely offense to.
It's the clearest way to say it. You have to dumb it down, because
if
you start doing some hardcore 70s sci-fi slow moving allegory, Oh my gosh. And Josh, you haven't heard me go on about this, but I watch millennials and younger watch 70s sci-fi movies for their first time on YouTube, and they'll just be like, wow, this movie is so slow. Like whether it's Alien or like Westworld, the original, or Andromeda Strain. I don't think anyone's watched Silent Running yet that I've seen, but they'll just be like, when is the movie gonna start?
Or even take an 80s movie, take Terminator.
Oh yeah. But well, they respond well to that one. But even the original Star Wars, the very original, they always say it was pretty cool, and I get it was groundbreaking, but why did it take so long for the movie to actually start? Is what they always come away with on that movie. And so if you're thinking you're trying to cater to that audience, then yeah, you kind of do need to make it pretty obvious, especially because this is in a way targeting them. In a way, this is like holding a mirror to that segment of the audience.
Yeah, it just shows, sorry, but it's become stupid, and it's like, okay, so that's Gen Z in a nutshell. Is that what we're saying? Is that they don't look deeper than the surface of anything. And when you present something as simplistic as Dot and Bubble,
and it's like, do you get it?
Simplistic in every way, shape, or form, that's supposed to send the message because they can only get something simplistic.
Yeah. And what's the
name?
And
that's a sad, sad state of that generation.
And what's the name of the guy who's sort of like the influencer, popular guy in the story? Is something September?
Ricky September.
Okay. So there's the obvious on the surface, as you say, like what he represents, like in the story. We got that, I think. But I just had this new thought. In a way, he in this strained metaphor that I'm working with right now, that this is geared towards Gen Z and this and that. In a weird way, September is like a dumbed down version of something like this new Doctor Who by RTD. That might sound crazy what I just said, but what I mean is
very meta.
He's trying to, and I'm not saying RTD intended this, but this is just what my crazy brain is seeing. September is this thing that's supposed to be like, it's sort of revered and recognized, but at the end of the day, again, the obvious allegory is that in these bubble worlds, you can get eaten by your own. Like, you can get eaten by your own followers, obviously. And in a way, I just had this thought in my head, and now it's getting away from me, like how this connects to Doctor Who itself, or New Who. I'm almost seeing like new Who under RTD as being September, as being this guy who people idolized, and then for people to see this episode and go, man, this is so shallow, it's so dumb, this new stuff. That's kind of like how, what's her name? Bean, I forget the protagonist.
Lindy
Pepperbean. She kind of eats September later, I mean, figuratively, and completely turns on him and allows him to be killed. And in a way, it's kind of like looking at the new Doctor Who and going, yeah, why do I like this again? This is actually stupid. And I actually don't really care about it. And again, this is me. This is not RTD talking. That's how I kind of see like the quote unquote dumb masses stabbing Doctor Who in the back, because they're seeing it as being like not what they thought it was before.
Yeah, I think you're...
Again, this is Eric writing headcanon, not
Eric. Yeah, so no, I mean,
again, not intended by the writer. It's just I'm seeing a parallel, an unintentional parallel, is what I'm.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. What I'm seeing is like the most centered character getting killed by one of his followers because everybody is just unnecessary when they're not helping you or when they're not entertaining you.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you just said. What I was trying to say about new Who, that when it's not entertaining you anymore, it's disposable. Thank you.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's RTD's.
Again, I keep saying this is not RTD's intention.
Because it's not geared towards us anyway.
No,
It's
you're
not.
right, but it is geared against, because traditionally in Doctor Who Classic and the first New Who, younger viewers were very into it. But who knows what the 10 to 13-year-olds think of this? I have no idea.
So Eric, I don't think it's a Doctor Who itself allegory. I think it's more of an allegory of just people who you follow online and stuff like that. I think it's more like that.
No, you're not wrong.
Versus Doctor Who itself. I don't see the connection to Doctor Who itself. I see more of a connection to, hey, I follow this guy because he was good looking and he
Josh,
could dance or whatever.
You're 100% correct on by design how it was made. I'm just saying, from my point of view, it's a happy coincidence that it ties into Doctor Who and other new shows out there, not just Doctor Who. I just think it's.
I don't think it ties in. That's where I'm getting lost.
I think it does, because the last thing you said is exactly what I was thinking.
It may be tied in our minds because we're older and we're not Gen Z.
Well, of course, I would never have this thought if I was 13 right now.
Not even 13, just 19.
You're right. I wouldn't have this thought if I was 19 right now either. I think I'd have to be 30 or 35 and older.
In any case, it just again, like, this is what I'm suffering through right now, is that it's just, the show isn't for me, and it feels like that every single day. Every single time I watch it, it's just not for me. I'm not complaining when I say that. I'm just stating a fact. It's just not for me.
It's kind of, not exactly, but it's kind of like Series 4 of New Who, which is, I was still into it, but not that into it. That's kind of where I am this far into whatever series number this is.
I felt a lot more that Series 4 was for me than this. I mean,
me too.
Yeah, but also all of
you know what I mean? Like,
all of us were also,
like, Waters of Mars and stuff like that. I mean, like, you're looking at, like, those specials, like, they were really adult.
No, I agree with both of you on this. I feel the same way. I was more into Series 4 at the time than this right now, but this is reminding me of how I felt in Series 4. It's bringing me back to that state of mind, even though I agree with both of you. It's and I still welcome this feeling, because I haven't felt it in 4 or 5 years. Because if you listen, I think, to all the episodes that we've recorded so far on this new series, even though I don't love it with a capital L, it's definitely got my head wheels turning again, which also, before Chibnall even came along, my head wheels had already stopped turning during Series 10.
Yeah, that's just the blow bar that you're trying to get over.
You go back to the tapes. Josh loved. Oh no, actually, we haven't done. No, never mind. Ixnay on that.
That's Series 8 and 9 though. When I was editing those.
Series 9. But
compared to this, Series 8 and Series 9 were tremendous.
The way I remember it right now. The way I remember it right now. Once we had that big Missy Master Cyberman zombie, it was okay at the time.
Compared to this?
But now when I look back in my mind, that was the turning point where the wheels started to stop turning in my head with Doctor Who. Like, that was approximately the demarcation point of where I started to turn off, like, my fandom gene, my intense fandom gene for Doctor Who in general.
I mean, World Enough in Time, from my perspective, like, it got me thinking about, how time works and stuff like that, like, all of those things.
Again, I'm not saying it's a horrible I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, if I had to pick a point, that was where I started to roll down the hill. It was around there, and it just kept getting worse as we kept going further after that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly during the Chibnall era, like, the stories were so, like, we were looking for diamonds in the rough with that.
But my point is, this is the first of me coming. This is the first time since then that instead of declining, I'm starting to come back up again, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but speaking of coming back up again, Carl, let's
hear what Carl has to say. I want to shut up for a couple minutes, listen to Carl.
Y'all made some really good points.
Well, because we've given him a lot of fodder. That's why I was kind of getting excited, because this is like really priming the pump.
You guys hit on a lot of the key points and really brought up some of the key things. I'm going to agree with you all. This is not the deepest episode of Doctor Who that I have seen. The message is pretty heavy-handed through this. But you all remember Idiocracy, right? You all talking about Black Mirror. But what struck me was the first time I saw Idiocracy. And when I saw that, I didn't really like it. And I didn't like it because I thought the themes and theories were too heavy-handed. They were too cartoony. It was not possible that anything like that was going to happen in the future. And so when I watched it, it bothered me because of the heavy-handed transparency of what was discussed. And I was like, yeah, this is never going to happen. This kind of stuff is not going to happen. It's fun. It's funny. And the guy that made it, he does all silly things. But, we know better. This is too silly of a presentation of an important topic to take it seriously. And, you all have seen the slide of society where, what used to be a comedy is now a documentary. At the time, I thought Idiocracy was too heavy-handed and too silly to be taken seriously. You all hit on the key point that this is not us. This is not we're not the audience for this anymore. And sometimes when it's an important issue, or maybe it's something that's a little too close to home, maybe it's the cartooniness, the exaggeratedness of it that makes it somewhat approachable to maybe the audience that needs to see it the most. And it is clear, certainly the old crew like us, that what they're talking about is all of the, the social media and the social bubbles that you create and the ideas that come out, powerful ideas that people are products, which is what's going on here. They've made, humanity. I'm saying with the double air quotes, or the humans. I don't know. They've made humanity into a product whose job is to do this labeling, this simple data labeling task. And as long as they're doing that job, they are fulfilling a purpose for some organization. I guess we call it a corporation or whatever that's going on. So it's lots of important stuff that they're talking about. The culture bubble, the productization of individuals, the elite nature of what is happening, that only a certain group of folks are even going to be afforded these opportunities. And then, of course, I'm assuming they're doing some sort of a class race thing at the end. I'm going to go with class because there, other than the fact that there were no other people of color in this world, I'm just going to lean on the side of classist and income here. But, obviously the lesson is the same, whether it was race or not. They're heavy-handed. But again, we perhaps are not the audience. And something that seems very, superficial and exaggerated the way that it does here might be what's necessary to pierce the bubble for some other folks that maybe are a bit more immersed in, what's a pretty clear pattern to us. What I found fascinating in the early discussion of this cast is, of course, Eric, you and Josh are going back and forth talking about your theories of representation. And I was sitting there listening to you guys talking about how, well, if it's a white guy and he hasn't been a regular person on the show, then we can see the trajectory of what's going to happen. That was very entertaining to me, to hear you all coming up with these strategies and these theories going, this is ridiculous. It's so transparent. It's outrageous that we have to keep seeing this again and again. Well, well, I'm going to say you've been having a rough time for the past 5 to 7 years that this has been, thrust on you societally. I'm also going to point out
that time frame in North America, but it was even way earlier across the pond.
Well, BBC has only been. It was a mandate with BBC like 6 years ago, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about Thin Ice. Remember the
yes.
story?
But that's when it became like explicit, like mandate.
Keep going, Carl.
My point is,
people they already started doing it in the late 90s.
My point is that you all have come up with some very interesting strategies and categorizations and frustrations surrounding that kind of stuff. Congratulations. There have been those kind of theories for about 50 years of television prior to this.
No, you're right. You're 100% right, because there's been different iterations of this. You're right.
But what I really appreciate is that you all noticed. That is the key thing. You all are frustrated and annoyed, and you have come up with these theories, and you're talking about, this representation is out of control. This has been going on for like 50 years. And so the outrage, should be beyond what is being characterized in the modern way as PC and DEI and all of that. This, thinness of characters, prototyping, stereotyping of, if it's a white guy, it's got to be evil. He's going to have to be evil. This is, and the math that you all are doing. I mean, again,
no, you're 1,000,000% right, whether we're talking about media in general or Doctor Who specific, because going back to classic Doctor Who and classic sci-fi in general, if it was a mad scientist, it had to appear like he was a stereotypical of, let's just say, the Jewish persuasion. And it even bleeds down to characters.
They were also Asian. They were also Asian.
Yes.
Oh, of course. But the mad scientist trope, always has the frizzy hair, the really thick glasses.
Go ahead, say big nose. Go ahead, say that.
Intelligent, nebbish.
It was the nose or the goatee. It was the nose or the beard.
It even bleeds down to like Dr. Wily and Mega Man video games of the 80s and 90s. Like, there's countless examples. And it happened in classic Doctor Who all the time, City of Death and more.
Robot comes to mind.
Yeah, and you're right. And in the Best Picture podcast, where me and Sean are jumping around in our TARDIS decade to decade with the most recognized movies, quote unquote, from respective decades, it has come up over and over again what you just said, Carl, because people act like the arguments about representation and strong female characters, people talk like it's a new thing that started with Ripley and Princess Leia. And Sean and I have watched so many movies going back as far as the 1930s, and I know there's stuff before that too, where there's a bajillion incredible and not incredible strong female lead characters throughout the entire history of motion picture. And it's like we're constantly like the Matrix, like we're replaying over and over again, like the same cycle. Like, where is this? Where is that? Oh, look, here's a good, strong female. And then a generation or two passes, and it's like the cultural consciousness like resets. And then we like do the whole thing all over again. You're 1,000,000% right.
I'm simply saying that the simplicity that this episode is, kind of wrapped in, they're trying to tie together some big ideas, and maybe not everybody has seen the pattern that they're trying to highlight here.
Yes.
And so, I believe that it could have been done in a different way. I think they could have put a little bit more effort into it, but they're trying, and given the subject matter, it is somewhat timely. which is what
Yeah, you're right. You're right, and you're reminding me of times when we've discussed or talked about a lot of '70s Doctor Who on MHC and elsewhere, but there's a lot of episodes from the '70s in general, Pertwee and Baker years, where the cultural agenda of the day is so on the nose. I mean, it's so in your face. Like, it's so obvious. Green Death or whatever. There's a million examples. And some of them are classics, quote unquote. And some are like, okay, we get it. And when you watch it 20, 30 years later, it's just so obvious. But it doesn't mean it's good or bad. I mean, you can judge each one individually. And this is something that some 20-year-old podcaster 20 years from now, in other words, a podcaster who's being born today, is going to do a podcast on Doctor Who and get to this episode and go, oh my God, what the heck was going on in 2024? I mean, in the real world. Because it feels, it's a time capsule, of what's going on right now. Discussions that are going on.
And I think with that kind of perspective, it'll, as thin as it is, will still make sense though. I mean,
100%.
It'll because it's it's not too often that we've even seen the ideas of social network bubbles portrayed, even attempted. So there are a couple episodes or a couple of things that we've seen, but not quite like
right.
this.
But from Liz Shaw to Joe Grant in a different kind of way, Sarah Jane and Romana 1 and Leela and Romana 2, and then it kind of morphs after that. But there was one after the other female companions who represented different facets of strong female. And it's very clear, and it's very obvious, and it's very 70s going into the early 80s. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just, it just makes sense when you look back at it all.
Can I ask Carl a question? Because one of the things he said I was a little bit surprised about.
Yeah.
So, Carl, you said, the last part when it was clearly racism, that you identified it as classism instead of racism. Mm-hmm. I was interested to hear more about why you said it was classism instead of pure, he's a black guy and I don't want to go with a black guy. Because that's how I felt. I felt it was like that this wasn't classism in this scenario because there's no indication that the Doctor didn't have assets, didn't have money, didn't have whatever. He just was black.
Well, that the issue is, remember, Lindy doesn't recognize either of those two. She knows her social network, and she knows that her crew are the ones that have the money. She might still have some, feeling in her mind that they are maintenance, that they are the sysadmins and not the people who rightfully belong in the system. So, I don't know. It's going just from appearances alone. But, again, this is the delicate line you have to walk. Because if you really were going to make this truly about race, there's a way that you can more strongly state that. And they didn't quite do that here. All we know is that Lindy sees some people that were not inherited into the environment and the program and that planet that she knew. She sees these two people that are messing on her timeline that she's tried to dismiss repeatedly. And now at the time when all her clique is trying to come back together, they're trying to make her do something that she doesn't want to do. And so she doesn't recognize them. She doesn't acknowledge that they are of the class that she knows. And they've been just bothering her the whole time. And so at this moment, if it was purely about race, and that is the story that they wanted to make clear, they could have made it more clear. It is likely on the borderline, but it is not definitive in that case.
Yes.
That's very interesting.
No, what Carl just said, I 1,000,000% agree with. because a few reasons. Like Carl just perfectly said, if they were really trying to make the racism a deliberate part of the aspect of this story or the way it was laid out, yes, Carl's 1,000,000% correct. They would have made it, as you said, everything in this episode is so in your face on the nose.
Right.
And that would have been. And I know people are perceiving that moment as if that's what it is, but no. I believe Carl's correct that there would have been little breadcrumbs throughout the episode.
I think there was one or two.
Yeah.
Also, when the guy with the long hair is saying that we should get away from the doctor and go on that boat, he says, "Let's get away. We don't want to be contaminated."
No, yes, but you're right. He does say that very explicitly. But okay. Also, furthermore, from what Carl just said, me watching this, not in my own bubble, but in my own vacuum, when I just saw this episode before I knew what anyone else thought or any reaction, and it was just me and the telly, I 100% only interpreted it the way Carl just described. I did not even think of the racial aspect in that particular way. I saw a white thing, but I 100% only perceived it the way Carl just said it. It wasn't until I saw other people's opinions out there that I realized that apparently everyone else, and I don't know that this plays into it, but everyone else's reactions, not just with this episode, but with almost any episode of Doctor Who, any reactions I see from friends and or random strangers on social media, anytime on Doctor Who, are always 90% Caucasian, whether they're from Europe or North America. It's 90%. So I don't too often hear quote unquote POC, BIPOC, whatever opinion. So I don't even know what that group of Doctor Who fandom would say as a group. I have no idea because there's nowhere where I can access it other than when I do my own podcast right here, right now, or with Kat or whoever, or Caleb or whoever. So I don't even know. So it was actually social media that informed me that apparently many other fans saw it the way you saw it, Josh. I wouldn't have known.
Now, so again, they're playing with, like you said, analogy and allegory, and the reaction in that situation can be perceived that way. I'm not going to say it's that there's nothing there that says, Caleb, we were talking about, don't want to be contaminated. That's a strong term, and it means, some different things.
I just took it as other, not as dark skin. Other.
Well. Again, all I'm saying is, for that to have been a true statement about race, and I'm not going to say it doesn't imply. I'm sure that's a part of it, but they would have had to have taken an equally strong and simple stance for it to be simply that alone. So it is not.
Oh, so it would have to be like, that scene out of Lethal Weapon, where he's in the the South African consulate, and he says, "I want to move to South Africa." It was Danny Glover wants to move to South Africa, and the guy says, "But you're black." So in other words, we had to have had something a little bit more like obvious in order. It's so funny. It's so interesting, actually. No, it's wildly interesting because all I saw there was racism against his skin color. That's all I saw.
Exactly. And I didn't even sense that at all. I was more with the class thing, the way Carl
but no social media. Just me watching it by myself, not hearing anybody say anything.
Yes.
That I was sure that was just simply skin color racist.
Yes. Oh my God, I'm getting so many new thoughts now from what everyone's saying right now. So this is what I thought is now with what we're talking about right now. I think to instantly, okay, I'm positing this slowly because I haven't thought this through yet, but to have that gut reaction by yourself, Josh, or someone else, not you, just a random person who has that gut reaction before they know what anybody else thinks. This is my hypothesis that I'm working on in real time. I think in order to have that perception like you had on the first take, and for me not to have it on the first take. I think a person in general has to be somehow trained by culture or what's already been out there on the socials to accept that premise right off the bat. And I think somehow, and I'm not trying to like exalt myself, but I don't think I have been fully trained to see this particular thing in that particular way, because the thought literally never crossed my mind. And another thing that has been tainting me lately with everything I've been watching in the last month or two, not just Doctor Who, I've been reading on my own time a lot of anthology nonfiction right now. Anthropological nonfiction books lately. And reading that stuff, and they talk about how we theorize human society and culture, developed, over the millennia. And the constant theme I've been reading with that type of material is it's not so much about, this takeaway that's in my head newly because of this reading I've been doing is that throughout human history, these conflicts that have been happening time and time again are not necessarily rooted in skin color, but in tribalism. Humans proclivity to be tribal with whoever they are close to, like their literal tribe, their family units. And it doesn't matter what hair color, skin color, eye color, an opposing tribe, they can look identical, but it's always, humans have this thing with, this is my tribe and they're not. And humans will find any aspect to quote unquote other someone, as they say these days. So maybe also because I've been reading all this stuff recently, that's perhaps why I saw it this way right off the bat, because I saw it exactly the way Carl described it. They mentioned multiple times in the episode how they're the special few selected who even get to be in this resort-like land. They're like the 2%ers. So I saw them in my head allegorically as the 2%ers, whoever those people are in our world today. And I felt like that had nothing to do in particular with race or not. Now you could make the argument that most 2%ers in the world are predominantly lighter skin. I mean, sure, but I still don't think it's at its core about racism, whether it's the episode or in real life.
Okay. All right. So you said I got that maybe from culture. I did not get that from culture. I got that from RTD. So RTD said at one point, and he said it early, that when people were talking about the fact that we have our first Black Doctor, that is the first Black Doctor going to face racism in any way, shape, or form during this first season? And he said yes.
No, but I also think two things can be a true offense.
So I pulled that as this is where he's seeing the racism here in Dot and Bubble, and that's why I immediately went to that conclusion.
No, what you just said completely makes sense, but to me this fits into my overall narrative, and it doesn't actually counter it, because for even RTD to say that is part of why it's in the cult, because he's not the only person who said that. This is part of the issue. This exact thing you just said, that RTD said that, is part of the issue that's plaguing that new Star Wars show right now, because that creator showrunner made statements not exactly the same, but sort of
different statements, but also similar in that you're gonna find. You're going to look for all of these things that person said.
Exactly. And all these creators and commentators, professional and fan commentators, who are saying things like that on their own, that's what I'm talking about. That's like the culture training people, because everyone's like repeating these mantras.
Yeah, but to be fair, like, he was the writer and the producer and the showrunner, the person who is trying to get the message across. And the message might have been class, but it sounds to me like his message was more racism than classism.
And that's, to me, part of the problem, because I'm sure that's true, and there's nothing wrong with
probably both. I mean, let's face it.
Yes. And this is part of the problem, in my opinion, of why this stuff all gets muddled anyway, whether it's Doctor Who or something else. Because there's nothing wrong with him wanting to inject an agenda. I don't have an issue with that, because if I was a showrunner or something, you better believe I'm going to be injecting whatever the heck my agenda is. I'm not even sure what it is, but I would.
No, dude, racism is like 5 times down. It's like the 5th one on his list of what he's trying to get across.
Yes, exactly. Which is also why I think it's 5 levels down in this particular episode, because there is some of it, no doubt, but I think it's backseat to the other things in this particular episode. But this gets to another point I wanted to sort of bring out again on this racism versus classism in this episode, and going back to the thing I was saying about the dog whistle of everyone's suspiciously Caucasian in this world.
Yeah.
So, and this is part of why I think this is an issue with the way a lot of message media, because I learned from doing Best Picture podcast research, they used to call them message movies back in the 30s, 20s, 40s, when they would make a very obvious statement in whatever.
Now they're all message movies.
Right, but that's what they used to call them. So in this message era we're living in currently, so because those are sort of the unwritten rules, because see, I think, again, this is me going on a hypothesis. RTD gets some of my show notes, but most of them he doesn't. And so we're not in direct communication every day. But because there are these unwritten rules right now in a lot of media that you kind of don't want to cast people of color in bad roles or nefarious in general. So this episode, I'm trying to put my head into RTD's head coming up with this episode. So he's trying to make these obvious points. And she'll try to imagine if this episode was, everything was the same, but here and there, some of her friends were Asian or biracial or whatever. And then you had that scene at the end, and some of the people who were about to leave on the boat were, of other race. If I'm putting myself in RTD's head, that would muddle the point that he's trying to make, because it wouldn't make it as clear, But again, not necessarily about racism. Okay. I'm explaining this out of order, unintentionally. So, because of the unwritten rules that you don't really want to have people of color in these nefarious positions, it has been the default, especially in the last 7 years. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You are.
It's been the default, not in every show, in a lot of shows, so they try to not put people of color in those positions except for certain situations. So as an unintentional result, so we have all these Caucasian people because it makes it very clear. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really the case? Do you really think that?
Yes, I'll tell you why. At least speaking for North America. For the last 10 or more years, when they do a commercial for insurance or fast food or whatever, like let's say it's an insurance commercial, and there's these skeevy robbers in, what do they call bakalavas? If they have these guys like robbing a house in a random commercial, in the last 10 or so years in North America or United States, they will not cast a person of color in that role in the commercial.
No, but what they'll do is in normal commercials, they will cast both a white and a black person, and they will be a mixed race.
I can find you guys a million examples from the last 10 years where there's these guys robbing a house in the middle of the night in a commercial, and all 4 of them are just regular milquetoast Caucasian guys, and it's like one after the other. This is very easy to cross-reference, and it's over and over again, constantly in the last 10.
Who was talking about commercials? I was talking about movies and television.
But I'm saying in the shows and movies that people are talking about, of course there's a million exceptions, but no one's talking about the exceptions to what I'm talking about right now. No one's talking about those things. Everyone's only talking about like Doctor Who and Star Wars and Star Trek and all these other marquee.
All those things have black villains. Recently, including the most recent episodes of Acolyte.
I know that, Caleb, but there are exceptions to the rule. And when they do have those exceptions to the rule, what's been happening in the last 3 or 4 years? People are getting mad about it. Those times when they've cast in the last 4 or 5 years, a person of color in a bad role, people get upset. And
As long as a villain isn't in a wheelchair, we're good.
So my point is, when creators have gone against the unspoken rule in the last 4 years, the other side gets mad. Like, hey, what are you doing? You're breaking the unspoken rule. Again, this
I don't think I've really seen any of that, but
I haven't heard that either. But
again, if you don't see it, you don't know it exists, obviously. I mean, but I see it, it's everywhere all the time. And they go, oh, I really like this. I really like that Marvel movie, but why did they have to go with the villain being black in Black Panther 1? Why did they have to do that? And
I don't recall anybody saying that.
yeah, I don't.
Okay.
It's clearly a small enough amount of people that they don't pay attention to them because they keep doing it.
I know you guys don't. There's a lot of people that don't pay attention to. There's a lot of, not just them. There's a lot of fans they don't pay attention to.
I'm just saying this unwritten rule. I don't really think it's a real unwritten rule. I don't think I've seen.
Caleb, there are mountains and mountains of evidence. It's not like, oh, there was this one thing in this one show. No, Caleb.
That's not what I'm saying either.
Well, I don't know how else you can explain the phenomenon.
Wait, Caleb, what? Please explain.
Yeah, I don't even get it because it's.
What's there to explain? I don't understand this.
No. I'm just I don't really understand the line of thinking here. Are you saying that there are black villains in TV and so on?
There are
that what we're talking about is not happening.
No. Okay. All right. There are aspects of this that are interesting, and pieces of this are true. But you have to scale appropriately what we were talking about. Again, you can scale over time, you can scale over concept. You have to be careful not to overgeneralize.
Yeah, well, hang
on, Eric. Let's hear this.
Let me try. Okay, so again, this is a complex topic, and it's more than we can handle in a single podcast. But I was very particular when I picked a time window when I was talking about these things, because yes, you're absolutely correct that there is sort of a social unwritten rule about the expectations of, being careful about race and how people are characterized. Now that's been going on for 15 years, but the DEI is over 7. There's a slight overlap between the two, but okay. What Eric is talking about is correct, that there was a time where there was an immediate backlash against putting people of color in negative roles on TV. It was unspoken, and the people said, hey, look, we've been doing this for 50 years. Maybe we ought to pay some attention to this.
Yes.
And of course, they swung too far the other way. But the first thing was acknowledging that happened. That happened first. Then with the more modern DEI stuff, the actual saying, look, we really need to have more inclusion and more diversity is an important part of this. We're going to actively put this in programming and whatnot. This is different than not characterizing people of color negatively in commercials and television and things like that. That came first, and that was more subtle in terms of the social impact. Most of the time, people didn't really even notice it until this came later.
Yes.
That was first, which was basically, look, we got to stop characterizing people of color negatively. That came first. And so what Eric is describing in terms of seeing people in ads and things like that shallowly, yes, that was, not, it was an unwritten rule, and that kind of started happening, and you started seeing fewer and fewer people of color being represented negatively on, particularly things like television commercials. He picks that first because it was the fastest thing to see, and it was the easiest thing to see. It took longer for that to happen in movies and television shows and whatnot, but we're trying to scope things. So commercials came first. That part of it happened first. Now, with the more modern stuff, which you were traditionally thinking about as DEI and, the placement of the diversity, this was an active, characterized thing that occurred, and I'm saying only really within the past 7+ years.
Correct.
It was an aggressive action to do this because, well, basically, even though they made a solid effort not to characterize people of color negatively in these superficial roles, they happened to look up and, Oscar's so white, they looked around and realized, hey, there are no black people, no people of color in any of these major roles. Maybe we should do something about that. Maybe we should extend our perspective a bit and start to create a couple of shows where we are putting people of color not just in the lead role, but in more positive positions. There was an active effort to do this, and it was in, again, BBC, I think it was 2017 or something like it, 2015, 2017, that they actually had a mandate to do that, because if they didn't do that, it never would happen. It wouldn't happen naturally, because there are too many gatekeepers that prevent that from happening. That's why it wasn't happening, is because people don't think about it. People don't see it. That's not important. So it didn't happen. And so, again, you go too far, but some people, we're going to make it happen. And unfortunately, a lot of times when they make it happen, it is not representative of the actual community. It's not the people that were actually involved, casting these roles, writing these roles. And so there can be a bit of a caricature and a bit of heavy-handedness going on, because the people who actually want the representation still aren't in the room, but they're just kind of shoehorning in a person to fill some sort of a quota. Oh my God. There's a whole extra dimension to this that makes it even more complicated. And we're not going to talk about that anymore. I'm just trying to book in the issues. That's
fair.
So there is the commercial aspect of this. Now, but hang on. The problem is, it's still even broader than this, because despite all of this, despite all of the efforts, despite all of these things that are going on, and despite people's reaction to this, whether it is implemented effectively or not, the fact that you finally have some characters of color in these lead roles is a big deal. The representation does matter. I've got issues because sometimes they're not done effectively. And what happens is that when they finally put somebody in color in these roles, and the roles aren't that great, then all of a sudden the backlash comes in. They go, see, you put somebody in color in there, and they're just forcing it on us, and they're not even really interesting characters. And look, this is why we don't need to do this. That's a whole other characteristic, a whole nother thing, and we don't have time to get into that right now.
Everything Carl has just said, I 1,000,000% agree with. So all the timelines are accurate.
All right, but
Carl just said more clearly what I've been messily trying to say.
Eric, he's not done. Let's hear the end.
I'm not done either, but continue.
I'm just trying to keep things simple, because this gets more complicated than this. This becomes very... And so, again, I'm just trying to untangle and unscramble what we've been talking about here. Now, there's a greater issue and a greater topic that we need to discuss, and it's not going to happen in this podcast. The broader issue is, well, okay, now we finally put some people of color in these positions. There's an immediate backlash simply for their presence. Whether the role is good or not, whether simply the fact that they are there, there's this whole extra sensitivity because of their presence. And that causes a whole other stressor and a dynamic that comes in the other way. So when we finally get an opportunity to try to put somebody of color in these roles, simply because they are there's a whole other audience that comes up. Now, again, we joke, we call it the backlash. All of that noise coming in from another side totally ignores the importance of what needed to be attempted. It totally ignores that, nothing was happening at all before that, but no one said anything about that then. They didn't have any problem with the absence in the past, but in a narrow window of time where admittedly we have swung too far in the wrong direction for some aspects of it, the backlash has very little to do with the fact that it is actually, poorly written characters or something's not, being done effectively. It is that the people are seeing a difference and change. And that is causing tension and stress and all kinds of chaos going the other way. That is frustrating, and that further complicates what it is that we're talking about. Yes, I want to say one more thing, and then we're going to leave it at this. One more thing.
You'll leave it. I have a few more bookends, but go ahead.
I just want to, the fact that you all are asking these questions and having the reactions that you are is important. When you were talking about, Josh particularly, when you were saying that you saw this immediately as a race issue at the end of this episode, I am certain that was probably implied. It was not directly addressed as superficially and as heavy-handed as everything else in this episode, so I am hesitant to go there directly. The reaction of the Doctor in this moment has the gravitas of implying that it includes race, but class is a part of that. I'll give it. But what I really this is a totally meta thing, and this is broader than the simple episode, but I just want to highlight one little thread that has occurred here. You notice the frustration and difficulty of pinning down whether the incident that we saw here was racism or not. Now, again, this is a simple story. You've got all kinds of frames here that we're addressing. But at the end of this episode, what to some is very clearly racist, which to some is very clearly classist, but admittedly, within the context of this episode, we don't actually know. It's not defined in this episode. But I want you to look at the doctor at the end of this episode, at the moment that this is occurring. And the frustration that he is experiencing in this moment. All he knows is he is trying to help. He is trying to save people. He's worked the entire episode to try to make a difference here. And what he's experiencing in this moment is a reaction and a blindness and a denial. We as viewers and the doctor in this moment cannot say for sure what he is experiencing. Is it racism or is it classism? I don't know. But the blindness that is resulting in effectively the demise of some of the main people he was trying to save in this episode. Just note the frustration of in that moment. Does he know it's racist? Does he know it's classist? Who knows? But the toll it takes on him at that moment and what he's trying to articulate at that point. Just imagine if you happen to have been a person of color and presented with that scenario. As desperately as you're trying to make a difference in that moment, genuinely not knowing whether what you're experiencing in that moment is something that has to do with race or has to do with class. All you're trying to do is make the situation better, and this is thrown back at you. His reaction in that moment captures a very unique perspective. And the fact that we could not definitively define it in this discussion, or it is not explicitly stated in the episode, maybe gives another perspective and an additional.
Okay, I did not expect you to say that at all. And I never would have considered the last thing you just said. And you just made me think listening to that. You're absolutely right to highlight that moment, which I wouldn't even have thought about. Because, Josh, imagine if this was the exact same episode, but it was any prior iteration of the Doctor, including Jodie Whittaker, but not the other Doctor, the other one that's not part of the numbering. If it was any of the other Doctors in this story, it would not be possible for us to even have this reaction, like what Carl was just saying. It wouldn't even work. Like no one would even wouldn't even consider the racial aspect if it was any other Doctor, actor, or actress.
Just know this. This is why I came back.
Yeah.
This is brilliant.
Understood, but
Carl, you're opening my eyes in a big way here.
Yes,
this everything you said makes complete and utter sense.
And this actually justifies, in my mind, listening to what Carl just said, this actually justifies casting someone like Ncuti in the role, because this has literally added a new dimension to this story. Whereas without it being Ncuti or someone who looks different from the other previous actors and actress, you wouldn't get this effect from the story. So that is actually the fact that we're even discussing the racial issue, regardless of if we agree or disagree. That, in my book, is a feather in Ncuti's cap for even existing in the role.
No, but it's a feather in the cap of this podcast that I've actually seen a deeper aspect to this episode that I did not see when I walked into it. And
me as well.
And as a result, like, you guys have made it, particularly Carl, thank you, particularly you, have made it a lot more interesting to me than it was when I first watched it. And I'm going to go watch it again.
Yeah, it's amazing. I don't want to tire anyone else, including those on the podcast. But Mike, just quick bookends, because once again, I agreed with everything Carl said from start to finish, 1,000,000%. He just made it clear what I was trying to say. Just some other side notes, which is, obviously I grew up watching television and movies in the 80s, but in the 80s you see stuff from the 70s and 60s as well in reruns and repeats, and then going forward. And at the time, okay, so now with Tubi, etc., when I've been revisiting these old series from the 70s, 80s, etc., it is so clear to me now, like in episodes of Murder, She Wrote or whatever, holy smokes, like the cast is 95% Caucasian. And there will be a Latino or a Black person, and they will always be like a secretary or a sidekick or the guy who's like the janitor, like always. Yeah. And it's very apparent, obviously, right, when you watch those things now. And or the person of color is like the comedy relief, whatever, comic relief. Okay, but Caleb, if you grew up at least the way I did as a kid, I watched all these shows back then, and it literally never dawned on me.
Oh wow!
Like what I'm talking about. Like it was just like, this is just the way it is. Like it didn't feel bad. It didn't feel good. It just felt like this is what it is. I literally, like maybe it's because I was young. Maybe it was because I was raised and taught in the 80s, because they used to tell us stuff like this in school. Like I was literally so colorblind that I couldn't see what is now perceived as like the racial misrepresentation in the old media. It literally, that thought did not exist in my mind. It's so blatantly obvious when I watch it now. And going back, okay, that's the first thing I want to mention, because that's what I'm talking about, though, because you do have to get trained. We all get trained by culture in our current society, and it's not always bad, you see, because in this way, I guess you could say culture trained me to realize, oh my God, it's so obvious now. Like, I didn't realize. I mean, and again, Carl, this goes back to when new BSG was coming out. That was 2003. And we're going like, whoa, all of a sudden there's all these characters of color and females. Like, they existed in original BSG, but again, they were like sort of side background characters for the most part. And that's 2003, So yeah, obviously, yes, the revolution has been going on forever. Okay, and then the other bookend, exactly what Carl was talking about how the casting and the backlash. Okay, so we all know there's the group currently out there who, when they see very obvious representation or this and that, whatever, to that group, it's like a dog whistle. Uh-oh, here it comes, the DEI train, blah, 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 diversity hire, blah, blah. Okay, that group, as we've discussed, Caleb, offline for other podcasts, there was a show last year that came out on Netflix, One Piece live action, and I was saying part of the reason that show stuck out to me was that it checked all the quote unquote DEI boxes. Oh, there's a trans actor. There's all these people of color. There's barely any Caucasians, and many of the Caucasians are bad. And it had all the quote unquote rules checked, but that knee jerk crowd, the one who gets upset at these things, you didn't hear a peep out of them on One Piece, even though One Piece was widely watched. At the time, it was the most watched thing ever on Netflix at the time that it came out. And I was saying, this is interesting. Why isn't the knee-jerk crowd reacting? All the red meat is there for them to be pissed off. And my theory then, which is still my theory, is because the show is written so well and the characters are all so developed, the good ones, the bad ones, the in-between ones. I think that if you just present a really high-quality product, everyone just shuts up, I think. And that's why I brought that up. So those are my bookends. So,
well, first, I just want to say, Josh, I heard you. And so, thank you, for saying that. And, I still agree with you that it is a heavy-handed episode. And given the scale of the topics that they're trying to talk about, I think they deserved more attention than what we see here on the screen. But they are important issues, and they've managed to tie them together in a in a way that makes sense. And in Eric's allegory, it is simple, and maybe it is more digestible to a younger generation, but there are still important things in here.
I mean, I'll just say this: like, I'm not one of those people that will be, please educate me, all this other nonsense. Like, I'm not one of those people, okay? Because the way I grew up was very colorblind. Like, I'm not looking at the color of anybody's skin, and that's just the way I was brought up. Because I'm Gen X, and that's how we were brought up.
That is exactly how we were brought up.
We were brought up that way, and I mean, I think that there is some, and what I'm coming out of this podcast with is there is some things to understand about this that perhaps I've dismissed in the past. And, I'm just going to keep my mind open on this. I mean, I'm not going to go crazy with it, but at the same time, like, this whole discussion was incredibly eye-opening to me. And just understanding your perspective, understanding everybody's perspective on this podcast is really, really great. And it makes it much more important for me to watch the show because I'm getting these pieces from you who basically are people that know, who I am, or know that I'm not going to be too reactionary unless I absolutely have to be. I'm just pleased that I can get that other layer out of this show that I didn't have before. So it's been wildly worth it for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what you just said, Josh, only recently did I start to dabble back into other Doctor Who podcasts to see what people are saying about some of these new episodes, because I haven't done it in a long time. And now I'm even more interested just to see what I'm going to do on my own time later is even on particular this episode, because we've had all this discussion that we've had on it. I'm going to sample as many Doctor Who podcasts as I can on this particular episode, because I want to hear what type of range of conversation I hear, regardless of wherever they take it. I just want to hear, because I haven't done this in a long time, but I used to do it a lot from like 2006 to approximately 2012. And the way it was back then, when I used to be listening to many, many different Doctor Who podcasts, is whatever the episode was at the time, people would more or less have similar takes, whether they were positive or negative. Like, they would fall into certain categories of why they like this one or why they don't. I'm very curious to see if that is still true now, if I listen to a bunch of different Doctor Who podcasts, or if the podcast fan scene has changed enough to where I will start to hear different unique takes, whatever shape or form they come in. I'm going to focus on this episode, and I'll get back to y'all like in 10 weeks or something.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt you're going to see the level of nuance that our discussion had today.
Oh, I'm not saying that's going to happen.
You know what I mean? Like, this is what I search for. I search for like a level of nuance, and this discussion was all about the nuance there, and that's when I start thinking, and so you're not going to see nuance. You're going to be like, you're gonna hear the same stuff from the folks on those Doctor Who podcasts, like
that would kind of be
stunning and brave stuff being discussed, and it really should just be it. There is a nuance here that I never even considered, and it means a lot to understand that versus just I really liked it, Yeah. I mean, who cares about that? It's not important. It's more important to hear the perspectives that provide the provocative nature of what we're watching, and that's the most important thing to me, and what I figured was lost out of Doctor Who now.
Yeah,
today.
You're right. The few other podcasts I listened to over the last approximate 5 years of Doctor Who fandom, and actually Star Trek, Star Wars as well, but let's just talk about Doctor Who. generally speaking, when I'm listening to other casts of the last 5 years, it's either a gush fest or it's a complete tear down and destroy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it had to be one or the other, whatever podcast you were listening to. I would love to see, this is what I'm going to do, because I would my hypothesis would be the same as yours, that I won't see diversity of opinion, but I won't know until I do it. And I would love to see if podcasting has perhaps evolved a bit more in the last 5 to 10 years. I would love to see if I can find someone just saying something, not what we're saying, but just something different than what everybody else is saying. Because you're right. Most review fan type things you see is just extremely positive or extremely negative. There's it seems like there's rarely a middle ground.
Yeah.
Or just the word nuance comes to mind. I mean, nuance. Like our whole discussion about that ending scene was all about nuance. And what I took out of it, and I don't want to say being educated about how you guys saw it or how Carl saw it, or like that is the type of stuff that gets my brain going versus just, hey, you know what? I'm going to say this right now, Eric. I don't want to give this episode a rating. I don't want to do it. I don't want to give this episode a rating at all. Because this discussion is much more important than the show itself and rating RTD's vision or rating the action or rating the special effects. I think it goes deeper than that because it's taken much more for me to understand the nuance than anything else. So that's my feeling about it. I don't know how you guys feel about it. I know we always put a rating on it, but I don't feel like putting a rating on it.
I mean, I'm perfectly fine with you taking that stance, obviously, but you're still going to eventually hear my rating because
of course
I have some thoughts on it. I have some thoughts on it on my own personal rating, which will be slightly different than how I usually rate things.
All right, well, you can rate it. I'm not going to rate this one.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's fair.
He's free to abstain. He's a conscientious objector, is what he's doing here. That's fine.
I'll opt out too. I never liked the rating, but
yeah, but that's just Caleb's default setting.
Yes, that's true.
But so that's nothing new. But we've actually been, or maybe I have, or everyone's contributed to yammering on. I'll try to deviate from everything heavy or not heavy that we just spoke about real quick on some other aspects. Quickly, something I've said here and there in podcast episodes we've done for this particular new series is that because you mentioned visuals and whatnot, and I will continue to say whether I agree with them or not, I mean how much I like the individual episode, it is extremely noticeable to me what they call out there the Disney money. Yeah, I see it on screen over and over again, whether I dig the episode we're in or not. Most of them will look pretty top notch. If I had to pick one that doesn't meet my expectation or reach that level, maybe it's the Church on Ruby Road. I'm not saying it looks terrible, but I'm just saying it's the least expensive looking on screen. Even though I'm not saying it was cheap because I know they had prosthetics, yada yada yada. I just mean just the feel overall that I get. So there's that, and I appreciate the Disney money, at least visually, etc. Everything, Doctor Who's never looked cleaner to me, and I don't just mean visually, but I mean the tightness of the visual production in all aspects. So that's commendable. And oh my gosh, I was going to say some other things, but someone else speak for a second so I can get back to my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And the show hasn't looked this good since 2010. I love the look of that first Matt Smith series. And I always felt that it was kind of a little bit more inconsistent after that for a long time. Finally, we got that consistency back. And that's definitely a positive. Except for Space Babies and those ugly mouths. That's the one knock, but otherwise.
Yeah, I basically agree overall with what you just said. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, there was a couple other loose ends I had on this story. But because I'm trying to avoid going back to the previous thing, I'm appreciating this series, this Disney Plus era in general, just because, like, kind of what you were saying, Josh, it is, for me, it's giving me something to mentally chew on, even if it's not necessarily what the writer intended. It's still getting the juices flowing, making me think, okay, because whether I like these individual episodes or not on paper, I feel like there's more for me to sink my teeth into than the previous showrunner. Because and I don't know, maybe 10 years from now I'll revisit the previous showrunners
again
era.
low bar.
Maybe I will see something more about his thought process, Chibnall, because I'm so biased that I'm not seeing it right now.
You won't.
It's kind of like Caleb being anti-Moffat and RTD for a long time, and then he's starting to notice little good things that they do here and there.
I always notice.
Okay, well, maybe you don't always tell me, but maybe I will have a come to Chibnall time in the future where I'm not going to like.
I highly doubt it.
I'm not going to like it. Oh, for instance, on one of the previous episodes we just recorded, or no, actually we haven't recorded it yet.
What?
Let's just say in an episode that's not been recorded, I'm going to mention this timey-wimey.
Oh.
I'm going to mention on an episode that has not been recorded but will come out before you hear me say this right now.
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to make a reference to the episode Hungry Earth. And I was thinking, oh yeah, Hungry Earth. And I was reading up on it again because it's been a million years since I've seen Hungry Earth. And I think that might be the first story that Josh appeared on MHC, the two-parter.
Yep, it was.
Going back to it because I'm going to reference it in a future past episode of MHC.
A future past.
And I was like, and I thought, I like Hungry Earth. That was pretty good. And I was like, who wrote this? Chris Chibnall.
Yep. Chris Chibnall.
Oh, interesting. And so that's what I'm saying. Maybe. But of course, it's because Moffat cleaned it up. Just kidding. But so and there was
Moffat cleaned it up, definitely.
And there was Torchwood episodes that I liked by Chris Chibnall. Yeah,
RTD cleaned those up.
Okay, whatever. I kind of want to see a Chibnall written episode produced by RTD now. I'm serious about that part.
You brought up the Power of Three, the one of the past podcasts, and you guys couldn't think of the name of them. I'm like yelling at my YouTube.
Me too. I was doing the same.
All right, let's wrap this thing up because
there you go.
We're no Joe Rogan. We can end it before 3 hours.
Tape's running out. Yeah, exactly.
No more tape left.
All right. So I'm sure once Caleb cuts out all the racist talk, this will be like a 45 minutes.
Hey, that's the core of the episode. He can't cut.
Where was the racist? Anyway, never mind.
I didn't mean we were being racist. I mean just the topic,
the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have a unit of measure?
Since I'm not rating it, I'm not providing a unit of measure.
Oh dear, I thought you were going to say since you're not, you will.
Space slugs.
I mean, you could use dots or bubbles.
I was going to go out of 5 racist rich white folk. But...
Too clunky. Too many words in there.
You're right. Okay, we'll do Tractators because I love them so much.
I wish it was the Tractators.
Oh, that would have been super cool. And then
he used the macro. Why didn't he just make them Tractators?
And it made me think we need to do a true Tractator episode, a la like bring back the Zygons. I'm not saying Tractators are as memorable as Zygons, but I'm just saying let's just give them the New Who treatment.
Totally like Macra. Totally like Macra.
Oh yeah, Macra. Well, I don't want to be that much background, but okay. All right. So.
How about lampposts that you bump your head into?
Okay, I was about to go with Tractators, but let's just do lampposts. Very Line the Witch in the Wardrobe. Okay. Oh, I guess 2 of you are abstaining, so it's me and Carl. If Carl's willing to participate.
Oh no, I'm going to support my conscientious objectors, so I'm just going to sit.
Oh really? Me?
I'll do final thoughts. I just don't care about the rating.
That's fine. Okay, yeah. Okay, you guys can do your final thoughts, but I'll get to rate this solely myself. So this is tough because before we had this discussion, I was pretty firm 3.5 lampposts in my head. and I thought I was gonna be there, and I thought I was being kind and generous because even before I spoke to you, gents, I was interested in this episode. I found it really interesting. I don't really like it that much, but I found it very, very interesting trying to sort it out and reverse engineer it from RTD's point of view. So I was not upset with this episode at all. But after the discussion, mirroring what you guys said, yeah, I feel like the discussion that we had is like on a 4.5 or so.
That's what I was thinking. Is that like the discussion was far better than the episode itself. Like I don't want to rate the I don't want to rate the episode.
Correct.
I want to rate the discussion.
Correct. But then I was also having the individual thought after that we couldn't have had the 4.5 discussion without the 3.5 episode. So, in a weird way, I'm going to take the average, and even though it felt like a 3.5 to me by myself, with you guys, it turns into a 4. But not because it's good, but because I liked thinking about it and talking about it. So I'm going to meet it halfway, and I'm going to officially give it 4 lampposts that I bumped my head into out of 5.
All that makes sense, and I co-sign that for you.
There you go. There you go. Oh, see, we all come together like a happy multicolored quilt. Or I should have said scarf, but okay.
No, but if all discussions on this era is intelligent and interesting as this one was, I'll definitely be joining.
Yeah, and I know other people on this podcast have felt differently, but I have got something out of, if we start with Space Babies, I've gotten something out of each and every one of these episodes, personally. So I'm fine with it, for lack of a better term. I'm totally fine with it. Like,
I don't think Space Babies was that nuanced, but whatever.
I didn't say it was nuanced. I just said there was things out of it that I was sorting out of my head.
Yeah, I was thinking we should do a whole podcast on the E-Trade commercials because those were better.
But my overarching point is I like feeling interested in new releasing Doctor Who again. I do. Even if I'm not loving it like it's my favorite series of the new series, I like that I am not personally bothered overall with what I've been seeing post New Year's or Christmas, whatever it was. I can't even remember when Church on Ruby Road came out, but I think it was Christmas. But I'm fine with this. And as long as we can continue to maintain or surpass and not go the opposite direction, I'm going to continue to be good with this.
Cool beans.
Anybody else have any final thoughts they want to give out?
No, I'm good.
I've already given my final thoughts several times, actually.
Any final thoughts? Caleb, it's on you now.
Well, I'll just ask this. I've been noticing this every episode. It's a stupid point, but is Babes the new fam? I feel like they have to squeeze that in every episode. The Doctor has to say that.
Yeah, you're right. And I'm glad you brought that up. Not because I'm going to talk about that.
Please don't.
But you reminded me that there's one more thing I meant to mention. This is the thing I couldn't remember earlier. It just came back to me when you said Babes. Aren't there women hot? No, I'm just kidding. That's not what I was going to say. We started talking about this in the last recorded episode. Again, listener, these were not recorded in order that you're hearing them. But in the last one recorded for us, it occurred to me that there's an actress who's been appearing in every single episode since Church on Ruby, or I think even before. I think she may have been in one of the 10 episodes.
Yeah, that's going to come home to roost and start with the...
or don't say anything that goes beyond Dot and Bubble. But
okay.
Well, they certainly made it clear here.
Yes, this is the one for whoever hadn't noticed up to this point. They made it clear in Dot and Bubble.
If they hadn't noticed till this point?
Yeah, but
wake up, people.
Yeah, chronologically on the podcast, we started talking about it in oh my gosh, what was the last one we did?
I think it was Boom. I think it finally came up.
Yeah, it was Boom. Boom. Yes, it was the one. It was Boom where we finally started talking about it. And I haven't seen the next episode that comes after Dot and Bubble yet, but
I have.
They finally reveal the secret thing. You know, she plays Lindy's mother very clearly. And so, yeah, now it's all in the open. It seems like Josh is suggesting we may learn a heck of a lot more in the next episode. I don't know.
Well, no, I mean...
No explanation is necessary.
No, I was just going to say the trailer for the penultimate episode.
Okay. Well, again, I don't even want to know that. I've only seen one or two of the Next Time trailers in this new era that we're in. So I haven't really been watching them.
I specifically don't watch them.
Yeah. So, yeah. I guess we'll find out what Riddle is all about
next time.
Yeah, but I guess I will actually give my final thoughts on the episode. I just wanted to bring that up. I saw it on screen when you were talking. I was like, oh, I got to mention that. But no, yeah, this is definitely a better direction than how we started off this season. I'm glad that they're giving us a little bit more of a science fiction flavor rather than some of that more fantasy stuff, which I didn't really care for.
Yeah.
It just is working out the kinks. I think RTD is capable of giving us some really good stuff. Of course, Midnight is one of my favorite episodes of New Who. Love to see him go back in that direction. And I guess this is kind of eking back there from where this began. So overall, I'm much more positive on this season so far than how I was expecting last year when we were doing those specials. I was expecting the worst from RTD. But he's proven to show us some better instincts.
I love this.
Yeah, when Eric goes up to an octave, you know he loves it.
I love this, babes. Oh, somebody made a remark about that when I went in a recent recording. I can't remember which podcast, if it was MHC or a different one, but someone made note of my upper octave. I don't think it was Josh. It was someone else.
It's always me, though.
No, somebody else did much more recently, because I haven't potted with you in like 3 or 4 months in real time. So, yeah, apparently that is a thing.
Nobody's going to know that because 73 Yards will come out before this one does.
Well, purportedly. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. All right. Well, this has been another edition of the MHC, Mostly Harmless Cutaway podcast. You know, I haven't said this in a long time on the podcast, but this wasn't the original intention in the naming of the show, because the actual naming of the show, because people used to ask all the time, why is it even called Mostly Harmless Cutaway? There's a really uninteresting story about how that came to be, but how I started to think about it now, like to retcon the meaning of the title, is that it's a cutaway from the typical Doctor Who discussion, and regardless of how deep we go down a bunny hole, at the end of the day, you should walk away thinking that it felt mostly harmless, whether you agreed or disagreed with wherever we went. That's how I'm starting to retcon the meaning of the podcast name going forward.
He's such a fan of Moffat, now he's retconning his own podcast feed.
Well, when I'm showrunner, sort of, because I feel like more like I feel like Caleb in a weird way is the showrunner, and I'm just kind of like chairman of the board or something.
Oh,
like,
no.
Like my last name's Disney, so I get to like be the figurehead, but I'm not actually pulling the levers anymore. You know, I just say, cut the tape, but I'm not actually cutting the tape anymore. Anyway, this is getting weird and cathartic.
It is.
Closing out the show today, this is Eric.
This is Josh.
This is Carl.
And this is Caleb.
And until next time...
If there's a slug next to you and you can't see it...
Don't panic.
Skin color. It's about
dogs.
It's about dogs. Oh my god! They heard something outside. Hold on a second. Could y'all respect the podcast?
Caleb, keep all this in. Keep all this in.
I get it. Y'all don't like RTD coming back to Doctor Who. But we just have to get along. All right? Okay. All right. Let's get out of our systems. I'm going to forget my point that I was trying to make.